Welcome back. Now, next Monday, ITV2 will launch Love Island All-Stars. As a showcast with glamorous 20-somethings, this has been linked to something known as the Love Island effect, where young people watching to look into the book Tweakment's cosmetic procedures such as botox, fillers and body makeovers, it's becoming a thing.
Yeah, it really is. And the former Love Islander Liberty Poole hit out just last month saying it was a dangerous celebrity surgery trend, and she encouraged her fans to embrace their natural beauty instead. Well, joining us now to discuss the latest trends is leading Harley Street hair transplant surgery, Dr. Raja, who is a leading surgeon. Very good to see you this morning, Dr. Raja. Now, we do know about the Love Island effect. We talk about it quite often with a new series starting on Monday. Have you seen an increase in young men coming to you looking for a hair transplant?
Good morning, Ellie and Peter. Thank you for having me, firstly. This is something that I've been on and discussed before. Perhaps too early at the moment to see that effect. Is usually, some sort of lag after the show's been cast and finishes. But certainly we see this effect it has on a particularly younger population of men and women. And in my practice as a hair transplant surgeon, I certainly tend to see that reflect in the way people are more concerned about their appearance.
I mean, they call it the Love Island effect, but it really is a social media effect. It's really taking over, isn't it? It's almost like the digital version of the person is becoming more popular than the person, if you know what I mean, by image, by what we're creating.
Yeah, certainly. I've seen over the past few years is, gradually it's got worse. People are more and more obsessed about the finer, minute details. And people tend to forget, when it comes to things like surgery, it's never perfect. We can always try our best to create an improvement, but you have to be realistic with expectations. And that same rule applies with cosmetic surgery, with Botox and fillers. And one of the reasons we're increasingly concerned is, the unregulated practices that are taking place in the UK, which now there's legislation, for the sort of aesthetic side of it. But as a hair transplant surgeon, I'm continually working with my colleagues to improve the legislation that we have in place.
But many would say that legislation came all too late, and there were, especially if we look at the aesthetics industry, there were girls as young as 16, 17 going to backstreet clinics and being injected by anybody with this sort of filler. So there are still great concerns about that, aren't there? I mean, when it comes to young people, and if a young person was to come in to see you for a consultation, what sort of advice would you give them? Would you see it as a positive, that they're perhaps trying to improve themselves and improve their image, or do you have to be quite careful really about the advice that you give them?
I think it's very, very difficult sometimes because, you have people who are dead set on getting a hair transplant perhaps, and they might not be the best candidate, they might not be suitable, particularly with younger people, because the chances of them losing more hair aggressively are much higher. So, we have a very stringent vetting process, but unfortunately a lot of the other clinics or lower end clinics, or as you refer to backstreet clinics, they do exist for hair transplant as well. So they'll often go ahead and do these procedures and leave these young people in a very difficult position. One of the barriers for them to access somebody like myself is perhaps the consultation fees, or the surgery might be too expensive. And I'm now working with a brand called Manual to make that more accessible to the general population and make it ethical and fair. So we're always working to try and improve things.
Yeah, as a guy, I know that hair is something, us guys, when we heard about this sort of thing, everyone got excited thinking if I get to the point, I haven't yet got to the point where I need something, but I've always said if I do get to that point, why wouldn't you do that? Something like that. I think where the problem is where people just want everything done, maybe unnecessarily. If you've lost your hair and it really lacks your confidence in it, I can understand that. But when we're talking about all the other things like fillers and Botox, which of course is up to the individual, but it's when they're going to young people. We were seeing someone as young as 10 getting these treatments and stuff like that. That's absolutely dangerous.
Oh, I certainly agree with that. We've all seen people where, we might think perhaps they've had too much work done. And this is something that's all too common. And unfortunately, the younger population, particularly young women, in the late teens, are falling victim to this. So, really trying to regulate that legislation, making the higher quality procedures more accessible is something that, we as an industry try and focus on. But there's no hiding from it. We can't get away from this effect. It's not just Love Island. We've seen that classically through the 90s with, celebrities like yourself, Peter. People would look up to you and want to look very much like you, So that is amplified so much more with the effects of social media. And now it's, very, very apparent, and it comes through partners often. People come to me, I was watching this show with my partner, and they like this celebrity, and I want to look like this person. And to make somebody look like somebody else, is always going to be a game that you're not going to win, because it's very difficult to do that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Raja. Really good to have your thoughts on that topic, because it is a very worrying topic, isn't it? We were talking about it just before we came on air today, actually, because there was a story in the papers this week. I think it was in the Evening Express, I think it might have been, on the Daily Express. 1 in 10 girls, young girls, are taking diet pills now. 1 in 10. And some of those girls, as you were saying, are just 10 years old.
So scary.
Isn't it just terrifying?
And that's them taking it. And then there's ones that want to do all the surgery and want to do this at that very young age. And it's really, really worrying. Well, a point that was made that was very good is it's not new. This is not new where people want to look like other people. I remember in the 90s, I had my nose done because I'd been picked on as a kid in Australia so much for my big nose and my curly hair, which is why I straighten it. I know. Anyway, the reason I'm telling you this is because I went to the surgeon and I said, can you make me look like Robert Downey Jr.? Because Robert Downey Jr. was, in those days, he was in films like Only You. He was in Back to the Future. This is way before he became known for what he's known now. And I remember seeing a side profile picture and I said, I want my nose just like that. So I can see why people do it. It's just worrying when you're very young. I mean, I was in my late 20s when I did that.
Yeah.
So it is really worrying.
I think it is. And I think it is sad. I mean, that you wanted to look like somebody else. And like
he
Dr.
is a
Raja was
good-looking
saying,
fellow, though, isn't he?
Dr. Raja was saying, all these young girls who come in and want to look like somebody else. It is. I just think it's so sad. I guess you're right. It's not new. There's always been this pressure, but I think there is this additional pressure now on the younger generation.
But I think as parents, we've got to take some responsibility, and we've got to just keep telling them positive things. Not always saying you look amazing, you look beautiful. It's not just about looks. It's about, talking about other things, so they're not focused just on
not as a whole. It's not just image. No,
absolutely.
it's so important. Everything else, isn't it? Really.